Alright, how's it going, people? So it is February 1st today, and the Indian government just announced its latest budget for this year. So today I just want to go through and analyze what the budget is in pretty much a brief way, and then a separate video will come a few days later regarding the defense budget of the year. So let's get started with this one. So firstly, I'll give a quick snapshot. So this budget is more or less focused on keeping a high target for capital expenditure as well as tighten the fiscal deficit. So what is fiscal deficit? Fiscal deficit is essentially when the government spends more money than it is actually earning from its taxes, from whatever capital revenues it is earning. That is what is happening. So the figures that I'm using to convert the value to the US dollars is $1 equals to 91 rupees. The today's exchange rate as on February 1st is 91 rupees and 96 cents. So, first of all, the total expenditure is 587.9 billion, and that has increased overall. And then we are going to talk about the total receipts, which is non-debt. Now, the non-debt receipts is $401 billion or 36.5 lakh crores. Again, that has also increased. And then the next net tax receipts. Now, that it looks like it has increased, but more or less due to the income tax cuts last year. The new regime is going to also start this year in April 1st, 2026. So that does indeed reduce what the tax revenue actually should be. And then we also consider the GST 2.0 reforms last year, in which you had the 12% and 28% tax slabs cut. So that is also a slight dent on the government's receipts, but still trying to maintain a 4.3% fiscal deficit target is very good when we compare it to other large economies like China or the United States or the United Kingdom, France, Germany. Germany is lower than India's, but more or less the deficit target is really good. I think that is a really good thing. And then the debt to GDP ratio, as is like, it has improved, and the gross borrowing, again, it is more or less stable. Considering that India's economy is expected to be $4.5 trillion in this year itself. Now, let's talk about how much money has been given to the states. So, the total estimated tax transfer to the states has been 16.56 lakh crores, which is around $182 billion. And then the Finance and Commission grants has granted 1.4 lakh crores, which is around $15.4 billion for rural, urban, local bodies and disaster management. Now, while the percentage share has been constant at 41%, the absolute amount indeed has increased due to the growing tax base, which should be increasing more, because right now, being a $4.5 trillion economy, and you are receiving what, around 315 billion worth of taxes, that is not a good thing. Most countries our size, like United States for example, it has around 25% the GDP to tax ratio. That is where we are lacking, not 25%, somewhere around 20%, but more or less we are lacking. So that is something the government has to work, and the amount of money that the states have received is also pretty much good. So next we're going to talk about the infrastructure allocation. This is where the main growth has actually happened. It has been a 9% increase overall. So the capex expenditure has risen, that is not 712 lakh crore, that is not even the total budget. My bad, I accidentally wrote that. Anyways, so that is 12.2 lakh crores of infrastructure allocation, and that is a 9% increase from last year's 11.2 lakh crore. And then there's some key projects announced, especially new sustainable rail corridors, especially in the Vande Bharat Express sector. Then the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has also received an 8% increase, and waterways have also been, there have been national waterways planned. So more or less the spending on infrastructure, the government is betting on infrastructure to create a lot more jobs, which I do see as a good a short-term benefit. I think if the government spends more, again, building more roads means that of course you're going to need more humans, you're going to have more people entering the workforce, even though it's the government spending it. That's a good initiative. We're going to talk more about that later. And then defense, as I said, we're going to be talking about a separate video, because this is where we really need to dissect in. So first of all, the allocation, again, I accidentally typed 7. The key is just like right below. All right. So the allocation for this year overall in defense, when we count the pensions, when we count the R&D budget, when we count the revex and the capex, that is 7.85 lakh crore, which is $86.3 billion in today's exchange rate. Now last year we had 6.8 lakh crores, I think, as the budget. So that time the exchange rate was around 84 rupees per dollar. So that's why the last year the budget seemed it was $80 billion. But if we compare it to the cost now it is going to be around 74 to 75 billion dollars. So more or less we still got that budget that we were hoping for, that around 95 to 100 billion dollars. Still a little less. I was hoping for capex to increase more. The capex has actually increased 40,000 crores. So I am not too happy about it, but more or less I think that's a good increment over there, especially compared to Pakistan, the threats rising from Pakistan and Bangladesh. In that sense, yes, there has been a decent enough increase in the budget. And when you look at the Home Ministry's budget, the Intelligence Bureau had its budget doubled this year. We are going to talk about that in the defense video itself. So one thing also happened is that the customs relief happened on the customs duty was exempted on raw material for defense aerospace manufacturing. So that is again, I would say that points to an imminent Rafale deal, as we have already seen last month in the news. And more or less the domestic aerospace development is increasing. The GTRE has released an expression of interest to have private sectors participate in a separate engine development that is different from the AMCA program. So again, that is a good thing. Although I am not happy with the R&D budget, it is only around 2.2 billion US dollars or 17,000 crore rupees. Not happy with the R&D budget. That should have been jumped massively. But then again, we'll talk about it in a separate defense video. And then we're going to talk about education. So there has been an increase from 1.28 lakh crores last year to 1.39 lakh crores. Not too much. Slightly incremented. The school education budget is 9.2 billion, while the higher education is 6.1 billion. And I kept putting the my bad. I am apologizing for putting the wrong symbol. That's just the keys right beside the 7 keys, so that's why. Anyways, higher education, I do believe that the more amount should be put in higher education, especially in institutes like the IITs and the IISc, because if you're not going to give them more budget, how are they going to put money into research? You can't just expect private individuals and private companies to keep pumping money in for the research and development. The government has to show that it is interested in research and development, building that mindset for students. Now, someone of my age, if we see that the research is not too prominent, people are not going to do research. I don't want to do research myself. So in a sense, yeah, I do think that the higher education budget should have been increased, but school education budget is good enough, and that is something that the states also put a lot of money in. So, okay, fine enough increment. This budget is more or less kind of trying to keep everything stable, especially with the 8th pay commission going to be applicable from next year onwards. So they have to pay the arrears as well to all the servicemen, the bureaucrats, whoever, all the central government employees. So yes. And then health initiative. So the Biopharma Shakti initiative was released with an outlay of 10,000 crores. Now I think I didn't put the amount for the health budget, but it is around 81,000 crores. If you are wondering, please check it on the defense. I'll leave the link for all the budget documents in the description below. So there has been some customs duty exemption on 17 cancer drugs and medicines for 7 rare diseases. Not sure why the customs duty even existed on cancer drugs, especially when cancer rates have been on a rise in this country for quite some time. But that's a good initiative they have taken. It will make cancer medicines cheaper, especially when cancer is already an expensive disease to cure. And then there have been an initiative to expand 3 new All India Institutes of Ayurveda. That is something I am really looking forward to, because right now we have almost killed our traditional Ayurveda and curing methods. But now the current government is leaning towards bringing a lot of that back into the mainstream rather than just having Western medicine. So I am really in favor of that. And then again, as I said, R&D, research and development budget has not been too great. The government has to spend on that, but I think that they have sacrificed on this because anything else, you can't sacrifice on defense, you can't sacrifice on education, you can't sacrifice on health. That will get politically explosive if we look at it from a political way. But right now, as an analytical way, I do believe that it should have been improved, but since we are keeping a very conservative fiscal deficit target, this is still decent enough. Semiconductors, there has been an India Semiconductor Mission 2.0 launch to improve full stack Indian IP and supply chains. Good initiative. I am very much in favor of this. And then for research, 200 crore rupees or $22 million have been allocated specifically for PM research chairs to drive high level academic research. Too less of an amount, but still pretty much it's good. That's fine enough. But I do think that research has to be like, the amount on research has to be incremented a lot more. And then again, we're going to talk about the tax structure. So firstly, the income tax slabs, no change. The new tax regime will be the default. That is like no tax up to 12 lakh rupees. And then the tax structure just increases up from there. And then the new legislation, there has been no reform. The new Income Tax Act will come into effect from April 1st, 2026, like I explained before. And then the TCS, the tax collected at source for foreign travel and education, has been reduced from 5% to 2%. That is a big relief, especially for people who go to abroad for higher studies. Someone like me who's going to go to higher abroad for their masters or their doctorates or even their bachelors. If they go abroad, they have to pay 5% tax for that earlier, but now on remittances, but now they only have to pay 2%, and similar for the medical purposes. And then there's a corporate tax incentive. So tax holiday has been extended till 2047 for foreign companies providing cloud services from Indian data centers. What does that mean? First of all, tax holiday means that the company who is opening the data center in India, it will not have to pay any tax till 2047 or very low tax. That is what tax holiday means. Now, I am not in favor of this, firstly because it is not about the economic investment. Yes, there is going to be a heavy economic investment in India due to this. Already companies like Google and Microsoft are opening data centers in India, especially in Andhra Pradesh. But you see, those data centers need a lot of electricity to operate. So if you are going to power them from, say, crude oil or coal based or natural gas based plants, again, it's just going to cost you in your balance of payments. Your balance of payments will reduce because you have to now import more oil, more gas, more coal. Although coal, India does produce a lot itself. If it is being done by renewable sources, you're doing it by solar energy, you're doing it by wind energy, that is good. That is where renewable energy is actually useful. And you have to make sure that the power does not only go to the data centers, but it should ensure that people do not face regular electricity cuts. That is not something I have seen anybody talking about. That is not a good thing. And second, water, because data centers need to be cooled a lot. So if you need them to be cooled a lot, then of course you have to provide a lot of water supply for that. Then again, that will reduce water supply for the general public. So I'm not sure how the government is planning to curb these two problems, but if they are willing to curb these two problems, I am all good with it. And then there have been reduction in custom duties for mobile phones, again, solar panels and cancer drugs. We have talked about that before. That is a good thing. So let's talk about some implications. So the fiscal deficit at 4.3. I think the government is doing a great job at this because once you have strong fiscal discipline, the international agencies will increase your rating, your borrowing costs will reduce over a long period of time, and over a period of time you are going to have to pay a less amount of interest. That saves more of the increasing tax money to be invested within India itself rather than just paying someone else for their loaned interest. And then the defense hikes, as I said, 15% jump in defense spending was already said by the Defense Secretary R.K. Singh. He already said that they're going to ask for a 20% jump to the Finance Ministry this year. That has happened, 15% jump, good enough, and capex jump has been to 20%, which he mentioned. I still think it should have been more considering the rising Chinese threat. Even America, the United States has now become a threat, considering how they are just willing to uproot governments everywhere. Now, of course, it's not easy for them to uproot the Indian government or anything. That is just some Twitter fantasy, but still, defense is needed. Pakistan has increased the defense budget. Bangladesh is also increasing the defense budget. Although those two are not too large of a threat, the insurgencies coming from those countries are a big threat. And then China itself, China has been rapidly modernizing. Everybody knows about it. Not all of their budget comes to defend the Indian border, but the part of their budget that goes to defending the Indian budget, it matches the Indian budget any day. They spend more on defending their coastal areas and towards building up for a Taiwan invasion. That's a different thing. But still, they are countering India very well. That is where we have to start outspending them. And then the new income tax act, there is no monetary relief immediately. The promise of a simplified act, it just suggests a reduction in compliance burden. So that was it about it. Now we're going to talk about some more benefits. Then there's benefits of the reduction of tax collected at source to 2%. Again, as I said before, it's a good initiative so that the families that are funding children's education abroad is good. Although we have to ensure that those children taking education in the United States, in the European Union, in China, in Hong Kong, in Japan, they come back and they help this country. There should not be a brain drain problem because of this. And then tier 2 and tier 3 cities, the city economic region initiative and the focus on 4 new rail corridors, this will target infrastructure in smaller cities. I am in love with the new rail decision. That is a good decision to expand the railway connectivity. Although 2 of those rails were from Varanasi, which is, I get the reasons why that was done, but I do think that more crucial, economically crucial cities should have more better, cheaper rail connection. Then coastal states, again, this is something more or less I would say that is targeted at the upcoming elections, that there is no doubt about it. But the rare earth corridors and the coastal cargo promotion scheme, this will drive industrial activity in the region. That is for sure. Then we talked about the cancer custom duty reduction on cancer patients, cancer drugs. That is a good thing, as I said before. And then the Indian Semiconductor Mission and Data Tax Center holidays. That is again going to drive up more investment. Semiconductors especially is very important because right now we are dependent on Taiwan, we are dependent on China, we are dependent on Japan, South Korea, the United States for chips. But now if we can develop them, sooner or later we can develop an infrastructure to at least develop 28 nanometer, 40 nanometer chips in India, which are the more general industrial usage. I'm not talking about the consumer electronics one that use 3 nanometer, 2 nanometer processes. But if we can build the general industrial application semiconductors in India early, that is a good thing that will protect us from all the geopolitical earthquakes that are happening in the world. And then we're going to talk about some high impact schemes, the Kartavya mission. So this is the finance minister framed this as the first budget prepared in the newly renamed Kartavya Bhavan. So 3 Kartavyas were announced, that they have to accelerate the growth, they have to accelerate human capital and inclusive development, that is Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas. That's a good initiative. I think inclusive development is very important because right now the disparity between the rich and the poor is extremely high in this country. We have still not reached the China level where they have tried to bridge that by creating more employment in the manufacturing sector, slowly getting people to cities, getting them educated. That has not happened yet in India, but this is a good initiative towards that. And then agriculture. So Bharat Vistar is a new multilingual AI tool launched to integrate the agri stack with the Indian Council of Agriculture Research agricultural practices, which provides real-time customized advisory to farmers. Good initiative again. The coconut promotion scheme, again slightly politically driven, especially when you see that Tamil Nadu is very highly highlighted in this budget, but that is again a good a way to export more coconuts. Specialty crops, again that has also been worked on, and fisheries. They are integrated development of 500 reservoirs and water bodies is going to happen to strengthen market linkages for fish farmers. Then MSME and manufacturing, this is where it has been a decent budget. So there's been a new SME growth fund, the small medium enterprises growth fund, in which 10,000 crores fund will be established to help high potential MSMEs scale up and modernize. That is a good initiative. If an MSME, that is a micro, small, medium enterprise, has a high potential of growth, like let's say in the aerospace sector, or let's say in the space sector, let's say in manufacturing or medical. In that case, the government will provide a 10,000 crore, that is not dollars, my apologies, that is rupees, a 10,000 crore rupee fund that will help these MSMEs scale up and modernize their processes. And then there's a legacy cluster revival. They are planning a scheme to revive 200 legacy industrial clusters through infrastructure so that they become more globally competitive with the Chinese export market, the European export market, the American export market. And then there's a TREDS mandate. So the trade receivables discounting system, what it is, that to solve the payment delays The government has now mandated all the public sector enterprises that are run by the central government to use the trade receivables discounting system for MSME purchases. We're going to get, let's not get into too detail of that, because personally I have to research on this myself, so I'm not going to say anything that is factually incorrect. So anyways, the corporate mitras, so it is a new cadre of professionals to help small businesses in tier 2 and tier 3 cities handle complex compliance at low cost through the Indian Chartered Accountant Institute and the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. And then again, this content creator labs, I am very much in love with it. The government is planning to set up these labs in 15,000 schools in 500 colleges that will train 2 million professionals by 2013. Animation, visual effects, gaming, comic sector. These are things that are globally in demand worldwide, especially in the Western world. So if we see the gaming industry, it is mostly concentrated in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, in the United Kingdom, a small part in Germany, in Russia. But with the government finally putting a push on gaming, on visual effects, that will increase economic growth in the long term as well. Electronics components, again, new 40,000 crore scheme to manufacture electronic components. That is where India is starting to become globally competitive with usually higher quality electronics than provided by the Chinese market or the Vietnamese markets. That is somewhere we are progressing pretty well. And again, that is not the rupee symbol. I don't know why I didn't proofread this properly. Then again, so the rare earth corridors, they have been established in Odisha, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. That is to refine the rare earths. The problem is that it's not that India can't source rare earths. You can source rare earths from Australia, from Africa, from South America. That is not something that you have to be worried about, that China will stop export. What you have to worry about is that the processing is very expensive, it is very capital intensive, and for that the government has established is going to establishing these the rare earth refinement corridors to reduce the dependence on imports and critical minerals. Good, that is a good initiative towards the strategic autonomy part of the Indian foreign policy. And then again, I think one more thing happened is that you're going to have a container building scheme. So during COVID, China hoarded a lot of containers, which caused sort of a crisis in the world. So the government has given around 10,000 crore rupees to build a large number of containers, shipping containers, that will help us in our rising export trade. And then financial market, the speculation deterrent, again, good thing. The securities transaction tax on futures was hiked to 0.05% from 0.02%, and on options from 0.15 to 110 from 0.10, to discourage the retail investors from high risk speculative trading. Good decision. And then the foreign asset disclosure, the government has given a 6-month window, one time only, to students and young professionals to disclose their small foreign assets below rupees 20 lakh, not 720 lakhs, without facing harsh penalties. And then the crypto regulation, I am not a fan of this, because I do think, even though crypto is volatile, I do believe it has a good future. You can argue against that in the comment section. I know some people do not favor crypto heavily. That is a completely personal argument for some people, but they have introduced mostly stricter penalties for crypto platforms failing to accurately report user transactions. That is fine enough, but I do think that crypto regulation is stepping more into from the decentralized world, where the government is finally putting some surveillance into it. You can have a different opinions about it. And then some social and cultural initiatives. So the Mahatma Gandhi Gram Swaraj is a new initiative that will boost khadi, handloom and handicrafts through global marketing and branding and market linkages. Again, good export opportunity. India was known for its handicraft industry before the British destroyed it. Again, that is a good decision. And the medical tourism part. So 5 regional medical hubs will be established in partnership with the private sector to position India as a global healthcare destination. India is already a big healthcare destination. I have seen many people from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from Southeast Asia, South Asia, Middle East, Africa coming to India for medical treatment, and even from the Western world. Because other than the Europe and the United Kingdom, Canada, US in particular has very expensive healthcare. So I've seen a lot of Americans come to India for some surgical processes. So that is a good thing. I think medical tourism itself increases other sorts of tourism. So people are going to come to India. They might get a surgery, but it's not like they're just going to get a surgery and leave. A lot of them will come, they'll roam around, they will go to different places. That will invest more money in the economy. That's a good initiative, and I like it. So final thoughts. Firstly, these are, I think budget this year is a pretty, let's say it's a very stable budget. There's no drastic change. The increase in defense was expected due to Operation Sindoor, the rising Chinese threat, although still pretty less. R&D budget, I am not really satisfied about. It should have been more. Even in the higher education sector, the budget should have been increased, but more or less, this budget is decent. The fiscal deficit part is really good. Financial discipline is very important. And yeah, that's all I have to say about it. The budget was decent enough. Not the tax holiday part on the data centers thing. I am not too much of a fan of it. So yeah, that was all my thoughts on this, my analysis of this budget. I have been studying about it constantly ever since the budget started to get announced by 11 a.m. and it's around 5:30 p.m. while I'm recording it. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and if you have any comments, any questions, or any counters to what I have said, please comment in the comment box below, and I shall see you all in the next video. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind.